Standardized testing. We can talk about that.
Sure, we can talk about that. You took ACT.
I took the ACT.
I took the SAT. I took the 2400 SAT, which we briefly have talked about before. But I don't even remember exactly what it is I got. I know it was around 2300. It was 2200, maybe 2270, around there, which would maybe be like 1550 plus, 1500s plus definitely now.
Was that considered like the threshold for get this score?
Back in our day, the kind of consensus was if you get 2250 plus, it won't be an issue on your application. So after that point, it's kind of nominal the better you do. And 2250 plus, you can kind of apply to any school.
And the 2250 equivalent for the 1600 scoring would be around like a 1520?
I would think so, 1520, 1530. So it was probably around there, maybe a little higher. I don't know if there's an exact conversion. Because we also had 3 different sections. It's scored entirely different from the digital SAT now. So that's ballpark.
How many times did you take the test?
Twice.
Twice.
Yeah.
To your score?
Just twice. Yeah. I took it twice, and then I got the score I needed, and I stopped doing it. I think I was done my junior year.
How was your prep process for that?
So I started in spring of sophomore year, and then I studied all through, like quite intensely through summer before my junior year started, and then I took one more exam in the fall of junior year, and I was pretty much done. I think kind of what was specific for me was that I was always a reader, so I didn't really need to learn reading very much. Back in our day, back in my day, but back in our day, vocab was a lot harder on the SAT, and so there was some of doing that over the summer. I am not I'm not a STEM student, but I've never had an issue with math. I just don't enjoy it very much, so SAT math was never an issue. The other thing was I don't know if you are in the same boat. We are part of the generation that had to take subject tests. And so we studied for SAT 2C math, which was far more difficult than regular SAT math. So I was already set for the math section. So for me, just being a heavy reader, prepping for SAT was a lot easier. The only thing is I was a very high anxiety student, and so I just needed to take it twice to make sure that I could perform to like my best capability. But
what tips would you have for students who have a lot of test day anxiety?
So I think the reason I talk so much about skill set, so I teach SAT the way I think I would like to be taught SAT, and so I'm a very high-achieving, high-anxiety individual. And so I really like skill sets that are kind of like if nothing works out, I don't understand anything, I have kind of a skill under my belt that I can kind of whip out and use. And I think that was helpful for me. Like I had learned a certain skills for if a question is asking this, I know what to look for in a passage. I know where to look for, or I know where to read in a passage. Same for math. I know if I see certain buzzwords, I know that this is what they're asking. And it's kind of having like an automatic system.
Some insurances.
Yeah. And it's best if you can read and understand things and solve things on a standardized test. But a lot of times, for me and a lot of students that I teach, you'll read a passage and you won't understand. And instead of being like, oh, I didn't get it the first time, let's go back and read more, you end up being like, oh my gosh, I spent all this time, I read it, I didn't get it, what's going to happen? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And you just end up wasting more time. So it's always great to have kind of like a backup. This is what I do when I don't understand a passageway to attack a question.
And did you have a choice between the SAT and the ACT?
When I was taking it, the ACT wasn't taught as much. I think I was familiar with it. I know there were a couple students who were much more STEM-oriented, who were much more comfortable with having a science section, who sought out to take the ACT. But back in my day, it was much more the norm to take SAT. Yeah.
Okay, so I took the ACT.
You took the ACT.
And I took it primarily because I'm a fast test taker.
Right.
My issue is never time. My issue is always discipline and stamina.
Okay.
And I get impatient.
Mm-hmm.
And I will just solve a question and have 100% certainty at that time that I'm correct. And then I'll go back and I think, what was I thinking?
Right.
But I knew that time wouldn't be an issue. And I enjoy that kind of fast paced style. So the ACT I naturally gravitated towards it. It took me 2 times as well, although I got the score I wanted the first time round. But the ACT has a super score thing. So I wanted a super score. So my first time I took the test, I started studying in the winter of my sophomore year. And I took my first test, I think in April or May of sophomore year, so right before the summer. I got a 34, and that was the score I wanted. I think still even a 34 is the score to get that will get your foot in the door for most of the top schools.
Right. It's not really an issue after that point.
Just get your 34 and get in and get out. I wanted a super score because I think schools like Chicago at that time took super scores, and so I wanted to get one score higher because it's easier to get a higher score if you're using your super score, which is the highest score in each section. I did surprisingly poorly on English, which is a section I usually should be good at because I'm also a reader. My issues are usually in the science section or the math section. But after a certain point for ACT math, you get to a point where you're able to consistently pump out a score. Science as well is mostly a reading section when you get down to it and you learn the techniques. So I never had an issue there. English, the reason why I had highest fluctuations is because, and I think a lot of students will relate to this, I never learned grammar formally. I just read. And I was a voracious reader, I read a lot, so I had a good feel for grammar, which is not necessarily a test-taking strategy for grammar.
It is not.
I should have paid more attention because I got good enough scores where I got complacent, and I was like, I don't need to learn about semicolons. I kind of know what they do.
Right.
But if you're not entirely sure, then in the edge cases, they will trip you up.
Which is kind of the difference between a 34 student and a 36 student. So I think if you have a really good foundation like you did, then you are fine taking the test and getting a high enough score. But if your aim is to get a perfect score or close to perfect score, then you probably need to learn the rules.
Be more disciplined about it than I was.
Yeah.
But I took it again, got the English section score I needed. And I took the essay as well at the time. I think it's very, very optional now. It used to be kind of not optional back then. You just kind of had to take it. But I got an 11 on the essay.
Yeah, we had a handwritten essay as well. That was not fun. So that was the thing. That was the other thing, which was on the 2400 paper SAT, the essay was always the first section. And it was an unseen prompt. And so I think for students with a lot of anxiety, that was like the worst. So you would open it up and then you would have to write on demand a new essay on the spot. And then after that section is over, you kind of have to reroute your brain and focus and take a lot of other sections. And we had a dummy section. That was the other thing that really threw people off.
Well, the essay was at the very end for the ACT.
That's nice.
And the reason why, not the reason why I took it. The reason why I took it is because I thought you had to.
Okay.
And I think nowadays you just don't if you
Okay.
don't have to, and it's not an issue.
Right.
But I think and this is like a very, very small consideration, I think your colleges do get your ACT essay.
Right.
They're able to have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's ever a doubt about your English ability, they can go back and see that in test-taking conditions, you were able to write like this,
Right.
which might be helpful.
Right. I think a lot of students, there are certain students who would definitely benefit from having that on their record. Because especially they know that you're writing in a time constraint, so the expectations are kind of different from like a personal statement on your Common App.
It's never going to move the needle, but it'll be a way for them to reaffirm the fact that you can write at a certain level.
Right, right.
Even though admissions officers are quite good at sniffing that out anyways.
Exactly, yes.